35 years is a lot of years, and in this video, I'm going to tell you whether or not it's worth buying a 35-year-old C4 Corvette. This is a 1990 Corvette, and back then they built so many of these. The C4 Corvette just doesn't get the same kind of love as a C3, C5, C6, and all the generations that came after it. I recently drove an all-new C8 Corvette, and compared to that, this feels like it belongs in a museum. 3.5 decades old, this car really is an antique. This Corvette might not be the best one ever made, but it's certainly got a lot of weird characteristics and quirks that makes this one stand out. But some of the things that stand out in this car are not for the best reasons, like this awful 80s shag carpeting. Whoever was creating carpeting for the homes in the late 80s, early 90s loaned GM some of that same carpet for installation in their Corvettes. The seats look weird, but they're oddly comfortable, just like the couch you have in your home, which is not a surprise because look where GM got their carpeting from back in the day. The carpeting and the seats must have come from the same home furnishings company. The carpet is even screwed onto the door panel with a million screws. It's a 35-year-old Vet, but it's still got power windows and mirrors. Big buttons to adjust the seat as well. Big old mechanical switches for the door locks though. Lots of plastic buttons on the dash for the climate control and the stereo. This ancient Corvette even has a cassette tape player. If you're wondering what a cassette tape is, Google it, or even better, ChatGPT it. Make sure to ask what a rev button or an FF button is on a tape player. While you're on ChatGPT, also ask it what an antenna is. What is this long piece of metal that retracts? That's pretty strange. Analog buttons and dials for the bass, treble, fade. This car is a blast from the past. It reminds me of my high school days when I had a high school teacher that owned one of these. You might think that this is an analog car in the truest sense, but guess what? It's got some digital goodies. Digital speedometer and a fuel gauge. You can push these giant buttons to check your mileage or your total range. Then you have this non-digital display with messages that light up. On the passenger side, you'll find a glove box that's on top of the dash, not where you might normally expect it, next to your knees. What makes a Corvette are these really long hoods covering awesome V8s. The hood on the C4, it's actually really heavy. 5.7 liter V8 in full display for your visual pleasure. And you can see the entire wheel and the headlights too. Couple of handles here to take the top off. In this C4, you actually don't have a trunk. This thing doesn't open. Instead, you just have a gas tank. Just flip this thing up and fill it up with gas. The steering wheel here is adjustable, but look how far up it goes. Who's gonna drive the car like this? The side view mirror is kind of in an odd position and a bit small. The rear view mirror is right in your face, almost a little too close. Right next to the seat belt, you have a cinch button. No idea what that means. You have a little bit of a storage area behind the seats, which is taken up once the roof comes off. These cup holders are so small that they're completely useless. Especially this one. My favorite aspect of this quirky old C4 are the pop-up headlights. With any old 35-year-old car, sometimes it's going to be a little grumpy when trying to start it up. Let's see how this one works. It's really trying to hold it together. Little rough on the idling, lots of noises coming out. No big deal, it just needs to be warmed up a little. The handbrake is tucked in on the left side of the driver's seat. About as manual as it gets. In true analog style, 3 pedals, 6-speed manual transmission. The first thoughts that go through your head when driving a car like this is treat it with care. It's old, it could be fragile. Even though this car only has 20,000 miles on it, it feels more like 200,000 miles. Anything on this car could break at any time, but you can't really blame it. This car is ancient. One thing that would make me really afraid of driving this C4 at night is what if the pop-up headlights stop working? Then what? It's noisy with the soft top, and you're gonna hear lots of creaks and rattles. Not unusual for a car that's 35 years old. Right now, there's so much wind noise coming in. It's windy outside, and with the soft top, you can't even hear yourself think. And if you have a passenger with you, I don't know if you'd be able to have much of a conversation. And if they happen to have hearing problems, forget it. In the C4 Corvette, don't expect precise handling. It's not sharp. Even though the steering feel is heavy and it's very mechanical, there's still quite a bit of looseness in the handling. The ride isn't bad, fairly smooth, except when you go on bumpy roads, then this thing completely goes nuts. Gets really rattled and harsh, even over the smallest bumps. When the pavement gets rough, it feels like this thing is about to completely disintegrate. The clutch is a bit wonky, so you have to get used to it, especially when taking off from a stoplight. The engagement point is really high. This car would definitely not be a daily driver or even one that you would take on long road trips. The biggest reason why you couldn't have a C4 as your daily commuter is you have no trunk. Where are you gonna put stuff? You have a little glove box, but that's it. There's impractical cars and there's a C4 kind of impracticality where you can't fit anything. It has climate control, but I think in the 3.5 decades the car has been around, the climate control has started to die. Besides the climate control, the horn doesn't work either. So as I'm driving around in the C4, if I have road rage, I'm completely out of luck. The way that I can sum up the driving experience in the C4 is that it's more of a classic antique experience. Not so much super fun or rewarding. The car is reasonably quick, but I don't want to push it because I don't want to break anything. It's 35 years old. Just the fact that I'm driving around in a piece of history, the early days of the Corvette, still unique and different in its own way, but not something where you feel this huge desire to own. Find somebody that owns one, drive it, experience it, and you can call it a day. This could be a fun weekend car, a project, something you can fix up and maintain for not all that much money. A very reasonable, cost-effective hobby. One thing I will say about the C4 is I do like how it looks. I know a lot of people don't like it because it looks dated, looks like it's from the 80s, which it actually is. But to me, it looks sleek, a two-door sports car, looks fast, and even today I like the way it looks. This 35-year-old Corvette is about as quirky as it gets. This car will make you work for it. But in today's world of boring, lifeless cars, this car can certainly inject some life into the driving experience. You just have to be able to fix up this car whenever it needs some fixing because, well, it's old. You could buy these highly unloved C4 Corvettes at a very cheap price. Pretty decent driving fun for the $8,000 range, not too bad. Just keep your expectations in check and don't expect a whole lot.